In the small town of Grendel's Hollow, nestled among the hills and fog that seemed to perpetually shroud it, strange things began to happen in the dead of night. The local kids would whisper stories about the circus that had rolled into town, not realizing the horrors they were about to unleash. It was the kind of thing you only hear in nightmares, the kind that makes you wonder if you should leave the lights on at night, just in case. But of course, no one took it seriously until they started disappearing. It started with a few whispers in the local diner, where people gathered for coffee and gossip. Mrs. Howell, the elderly widow who ran the only bed and breakfast in town, was the first to notice. She'd heard strange noises in the night, soft, almost rhythmic sounds, like the shuffle of shoes on the pavement, and a high-pitched laugh that didn't sound quite human. At first, she brushed it off. The town was full of eccentric characters, after all. But when she looked out her window late one evening, her blood ran cold. A figure stood in the shadows, almost too still, its outline barely visible in the dim light of the street lamp. The figure wore what could only be described as a clown's costume: pale white face paint, exaggerated red lips, and a bright orange wig that seemed to shimmer in the fading light. But it wasn't the costume that terrified her. It was the eyes. They glowed, not in the way that light reflects off something shiny, but in a way that made them look wrong, like they had their own source of illumination. The thing, or whatever it was, just stood there, staring into her window, unmoving. Mrs. Howell had lived in Grendel's Hollow for decades, and in all that time, she had never seen anything like it. The next morning, the town woke up to its first missing person report. Young Tommy Peterson, just 15, had been out with friends the night before, walking along the edge of the woods when he vanished. His friends were terrified, but they had no idea what had happened to him. They didn't even hear a scream, just silence, and then Tommy was gone. The search party scoured the woods for days, but all they found were traces of mud and the remnants of a trail that seemed to lead nowhere. As the days turned into weeks, more children began to disappear. None of them were ever found, and no one had any idea where they had gone. The police were baffled. The town was in a state of constant fear, but the most chilling part was that the killer seemed to leave no trace. No footprints, no signs of a struggle, nothing to explain what had happened. The only consistent detail in the accounts was the figure, the clown. It was seen everywhere, or rather, nowhere. People would report seeing it standing at the edge of the forest, or outside their windows late at night. The details were always the same: white face paint, red lips, glowing eyes, and that eerie, chilling laugh. Some said it was only a matter of time before it came for them too. In the local tavern, the adults began to drink away their fear, telling stories that grew more and more fantastical with each passing night. Some claimed the clown was a demon, cursed to walk the earth for eternity, seeking revenge on the living. Others said it was a spirit from the circus, a vengeful ghost that came to take what was rightfully its own. But there was one theory that began to take hold, one that people whispered about in hushed tones. The clown was not some supernatural force. It was human. And it wasn't just a killer, it was a predator, hunting its prey with a methodical, terrifying precision. The clown's victims were always children, and it would leave behind no evidence, no sign of its presence. It was as if it had some supernatural ability to make itself invisible, to strike without being seen. But the most terrifying part of this theory was the idea that the clown was among them, maybe even one of them. What if it was someone in the town? Someone they knew? It was a thought that gnawed at the edges of their sanity, pushing them to look at their neighbors with suspicion. It wasn't until a group of teenagers decided to take matters into their own hands that the full scale of the terror came into focus. They had grown tired of the town's complacency, tired of the fear that gripped every corner of Grendel's Hollow. They banded together, armed with flashlights, cameras, and a determination to find the clown. It was reckless, but it was also the only thing they could do to reclaim their town. They ventured into the woods, following the trails of mud and broken branches they had discovered in the search for Tommy Peterson. The air was thick with unease, and every step they took seemed to echo louder than the last. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the silence around them grew oppressive. The wind seemed to hold its breath, and the trees loomed like silent sentinels. Then, one by one, they began to hear it, the laugh. It was high-pitched, almost childlike, but it was unmistakable. It was close. Too close. The teens froze in place, their flashlights darting around the darkness, but they saw nothing. No movement. No shadow. But the laugh grew louder, circling them like some unseen predator. Panic set in. They knew they were being hunted, but they didn't know how to fight back. Suddenly, one of the girls, Sarah, screamed. Her flashlight dropped to the ground, and the others spun around to see her stumbling backward, her face pale with terror. Her mouth opened to scream again, but no sound came out. In the dim light, they could see her shaking, her body frozen in place. Then, without warning, she collapsed to the ground, her body twitching as if something had taken hold of her from the inside. The other teens rushed to her, but she was already gone. It was as if the life had been drained from her in an instant. The remaining teens scrambled to escape, but the clown was already there. It was standing just beyond the reach of their flashlights, its glowing eyes staring into their souls. The last thing they saw was the distorted smile beneath the painted face. Then everything went dark. When the authorities arrived, there was nothing left but the abandoned equipment, flashlights, cameras, and the bloodied remains of Sarah. The rest of the teens were gone, just like the others. The clown, it seemed, was still out there, hunting, waiting for the next group of victims to stumble into its lair. The town was no longer just afraid. It was dying. People stopped leaving their homes after dark, and even during the day, there was a sense of dread that hung in the air. But the worst part was the uncertainty. No one knew when the clown would strike next, or if it ever truly left. Some say it still lurks in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to make itself known. Others believe it has long since moved on, its thirst for blood sated for now. But one thing is certain: if you ever find yourself in Grendel's Hollow, and the air feels heavy, the trees too still, and the laughter too loud, you should run. Because the clown is always watching, always waiting, and you may never know when you're the next to disappear. As the sun sets over Grendel's Hollow and the shadows stretch long, remember this: you can never truly escape the things that haunt you, especially when they wear a smile. So, next time you hear that unsettling laugh, or feel that chill crawl up your spine, don't ignore it, run, or risk becoming just another whispered story in the dark. If you enjoyed this tale of terror, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more chilling stories. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a new nightmare. Stay safe, and keep the lights on.